Good afternoon. We are going to, on the panel today, talk about rethinking talent as we move into AI. I'm Tashia Mallette. I am an HR executive turned consultant and now doctoral student at USC. And I would like to introduce the rest of the panel. And so first, beside me, we have Zoe McKiness. If you would like to say a couple things about yourself and your background.
Absolutely. So I come from more of a technology versus an HR background. I've currently been at Tala for 3.5 years. We are based in the US, but our mission is serving the global majority. So approximately 4 million people across the world do not have access to traditional financing services or banks. And so we use non-traditional data to underwrite and give access and control to those individuals. We currently operate in Central America, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Africa.
Eric?
Hey everybody, Eric Chin here. I'm a CPA. I'm also the CFO at a company called Akido Labs. We're a healthcare technology company. I'm also the audit committee chair of a company called BioAmerica. It's a biotech publicly traded company. I'm also on the board of Rhode Island Primary Care Physicians. And I just joined the advisory board of an AI-powered behavioral health platform called Owl Therapy.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Karina Montilla, Edmonds, and I work for that large European company that everybody in the previous panel talked about. It's SAP, and I currently lead academic and research partnerships, but I have been in the AI space for many, many years, including the early days of speech to text. And so it's really nice to see how far we've come along. So I look forward to our conversation today.
Hi everybody, thanks so much for having us today. Thanks to Tasha and Todd and the AILA team and LMU for hosting this amazing event. I think round of applause for that. I'm Raju. I help lead media and entertainment, AI strategy in media and entertainment at Google under the Google Cloud division. My background is primarily in media and entertainment technology. I've been operating in that area for about 20 years now, between data and AI and creative tooling, etc., always in a sense of strategy and business partnerships type of function. But I'm really always at that center point of how can we enable creative and media corporations to utilize technology to better support storytelling and this business as a whole.
Thank you for the introductions. I guess the first question we'll jump in is one that's been in the news, and I think every organization is talking about this fear of job loss or reskilling that's happening, causing a lot of anxiety. So if we can spend a moment talking about how your organizations are turning employee anxiety about AI-driven job change into a sense of agency and opportunity.
Thanks, Sasha. I can jump in only because we've had a recent study. It's our global survey every year, and it was just this past May. So we had about 4,000 managers and employees who answered, and the ironic thing is that there is a very close correlation of AI literacy to AI optimism and lack of or reduced anxiety, which means that the more anxiety people have is because they are feeling less prepared, right, and have less information. And so one of the ways SAP, which is an enterprise planning software company, we provide every business every tool that they need to run their company, including software for HR, so SuccessFactor. And we have a software that actually helps our employees automatically find AI to identify growth opportunities, learning opportunities, because people are typically, if they're feeling anxiety, it's because they're overwhelmed with the amount of information that they feel that they have to digest. And so AI is an area where, experiential learning, I can't pronounce that word, I should mention English is my second language, but doing, right? And getting comfortable with these AI tools is so important to reduce the amount of anxiety that employees are feeling and making sure that they feel empowered with these tools. So I'll say that.
Yeah, I can jump in here. So I'll speak from Akido Labs and Owl Therapy because both are in the healthcare space. So what we've been facing post-pandemic is just a dearth of healthcare providers. A lot of doctors retired during the pandemic, less people are going into medical school. And so from our perspective, from the healthcare industry, it's, let me ask you guys all a question. How many of you have maybe had to wait a month or more for a specialist visit or a therapist visit? Raise your hand if you've had to wait that long. And you really wanted to go like soon, right? I mean, that's a problem that everyone in the room is raising their hand for that. So I'll tell you, working with the providers, they want to see you. It's not that they don't want to see you, it's just there's not enough of them. And so for me, I'm fortunate to be in an industry where that supply is needed. And so the AI is really, we're focusing on augmenting all of those providers so that one day we can provide same-day visits for those specialists, like a cardiologist, or on Owl Therapy side, a therapist or a coach. So yeah, for us, it's one of those things where the necessity kind of builds the demand, if you will.
I know we spoke about the assistance and the use in your organization supporting doctors. Is that something you see transforming?
Yeah, 100% in terms of, so I'll speak to this from Akido's perspective. What we're developing at Akido is AI-powered EMR, that stands for Electronic Medical Records System. Basically, what this AI technology is going to do is it's taking the heavy lifting off of the doctor's plate. We're putting medical assistants into the rooms with the patients. The medical assistants are essentially leading the clinic visit, talking to the patients. Data gets collected, gets sent back to the doctor to review the AI prepared care plan, and the doctor is responsible for approving it. So that's how their efficiency goes up, is because now they are able to see or review the cases of patients at the speed that they can read the summaries, as opposed to currently they're constrained by how fast patients talk. And so if you think about grandma or grandfather going to the doctor, there's a differential there in terms of how fast they can get through each patient. So.
Thank you, Ranjit.
Yeah, I think I can look at this from the lens of media and entertainment, really, versus others on this panel. And I think looking at it that way, I mean, we're a bulk of a creative community at its heart, a storytelling community. And I think just taking a step back from it, and Karina mentioned this term earlier, but it's looking at the apprehension. There's a natural apprehension around the potential for AI to, possibly replace creative work or replace talent. And I think just acknowledging first and foremost that is a natural thing. Like when you look at history and when you look at the advent of photography, audio recordings, computer-generated imagery, this type of cycle happens whenever we have a large-scale technology innovation like this. But the story, when you look back into that history, is not one of outright talent replacement and downsizing, it's one of talent reskilling at its heart. So in my sense, I think most of my colleagues would share this feeling on the Google side as well, is that AI is not inherently primed to replace that core creative capability that we have in entertainment and in storytelling, in content production sort of functions. What we should think of it as is really a tool for augmenting human productivity and efficiency and output. And when you look at it from that lens, I mean, I think about the best things that organizations and we as individuals can do in order order to minimize that kind of anxiety is going to be, I completely agree with Karina was saying earlier, which is really like, it's first and foremost transparency and communication from the organizations that are implementing these tools, especially to their employees, to say, okay, here are intended use, here are some of the limitations of those capabilities, here's what we're trying to do. But beyond that, and almost more importantly, it's about providing a safe environment for learning and utilizing those tools. Because the only way to eliminate really the fear that is driving a lot of this right now is a fear of the unknown inherently, right? And the way that you eliminate that fear is you change the unknown to a known, right? So providing accessibility and education about that tooling is going to be, in my opinion, the solution to that.
And I know we spoke before it came up in the last panel, Vince, I think, mentioned the importance of experimentation. We talked about an AI sandbox at Google. How is that helping employees to gain exposure to AI in the creative process?
Yeah, I think what we talked about before was Google has an incredibly healthy dog food culture. So we all very actively try out a lot of new features, a lot of capabilities. It's all also the type of employee culture where we're all raising our hands when you tell someone that there's a new feature that the product team and the engineering teams want to test out, right? So I think encouraging that type of culture, but moreover, making sure it's safe, secure, and scalable is key to organizations like that. Providing mechanisms as well as, well, speaking of that, I mean, we have folks within our organization that can make those types of large-scale decisions around AI. I know the last panel had a conversation around like a chief AI officer type of role. I don't know, I can't speak to one way or the other on that, but I think establishing sort of cross-functional committees that can help to track, evaluate, and make strategic recommendations about AI, then enabling those types of sandbox environments for safe usage, and then also in parallel to all of that, working with legal and security stakeholders in order to establish what the guardrails are on that, is the way in which these organizations can help manage this type of adoption and do so in a way that minimizes anxiety but maximizes really productivity.
Thank you. So do you have a way that you've been relieving anxiety at Tala?
Yeah, I think for me, being in a fintech startup, the anxiety is less about job replacement and more about FOMO, which came up in the previous panel. And so I think building on what Ranjit was saying, for me, is being part of the governance process as well as the RV organization, really starting with a set of principles, building off of what we're already doing with information security and data privacy. And so for me, it really starts with like, what is the use case? It's a tool, not an end-all be-all. There's no silver bullet right now with AI, maybe in 5 years, we don't know yet. And then really being intentional. And I think for us, with the use case piece where it gets a little bit muddy, is we're clearly investing in an AI sandbox, in opportunities for LLMs and other technologies to accelerate our underwriting superpower. But then when we have folks in operations or customer service or even looking for their own productivity within their team, they're kind of like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. And so we've really been working to have this umbrella framework that's based in the governance piece and then the nuanced guardrails, starting with an explicit build versus buy conversation. And I'm totally open to build versus buy, in particular build where it's going to be proprietary, such as underwriting, but also to make sure we don't end up with a collection of pieces that don't fit together. And for me, the biggest thing, leading the data organization is making sure we have a fluid, uninterrupted data foundation that we're drawing upon, in particular because our customers are not represented on the internet, so this is really a proprietary asset for us, both to continue to add value to the customers, but also to ensure that we are doing everything in our power from a data privacy and customer trust perspective.
Perfect. I think I'm old enough, at least to admit, I remember the internet and this discussion happening around then. I was working at an insurance company. We used to have the triplicate forms and had to take it to underwriting, et cetera. There was a lot of reskilling that we had to do as an organization back in those days as well. And it sounds like reskilling is the name of the game here. As you see in your organizations, how can companies build a culture of continuous reinvention that includes all roles, not just high performers and not just exempt workers?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So in the healthcare industry, you know, I'm not going to pull any punches here. It's an industry that has been somewhat resistant to technology, depending on, you know, what company you're looking at. But overall, I think I had read an article once that said probably the government is like last in adopting technology, and then healthcare is second to last. And so I think for me, it's really all about the tone at the top, setting a comfort zone of, we want you to ask questions, we want you to be engaged. And when I think about the healthcare providers, the physicians, as well as the nurse practitioners, even down to the scheduler and the front desk, we really try to emphasize that, look, we want to train you, and this is an open environment. Ask the questions. If you don't ask the questions, then it's hard for us to train you on upskilling you and getting you there.
Yeah, I can add on to that. I think first, most companies, most successful companies are known to have embraced a growth mindset, right? And so I just see AI as a continuous, you know, learning curve at the moment for people, that you know, again, have to embrace, and giving people the opportunity in terms of the reskilling to sort of take charge of their careers and understand like what's needed. Again, because we have the success factor, we have a talent intelligence tool that can actually help employees navigate future career growth and tell you what are those skills that you need. A lot of companies are now going to more of a skill-based dichotomy, where they are, you know, cataloging what are the skills of their current employee base and where do they need to go, and by such, you know, providing suggested learning assets, like things that you should be picking up on. So I think that's, you know, one of the ways, but yeah, we're always going to be learning. I think, you know, we chatted earlier, and I think Ranjit as well had mentioned, one of my favorite sayings is like, you know, this fear that your job's going to be taken by AI is really unfounded. It's the more realistic view is that somebody who knows AI will take your job. So it's about getting involved, and something that everyone talked about earlier, these sandboxes, the dog fooding at Google, that's always about getting employee feedback. And that's so important, because as you build these tools, as you build these learning assets, you need that feedback from your employees. You know, everyone has made mistakes in this field, and rolling out a big enterprise-wide learning asset that just doesn't land with your employees is the biggest mistake you can make. And that's why it's so important, again, that we have these sandboxes, that we have these pilots, of course, not endless pilots, but it's so important to give these employees an opportunity to provide the feedback.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question, just because I'm very familiar with success factors, and there's discussion about bias that happened in the other panel, and as we're talking about performance reviews and career trajectory and growth and development and those type of things, how is SAP success factors getting in front of the bias conversation?
Great question, and I promise I didn't pay her to ask me that. But one of the proudest things that I love about Success Factor is that one of the first use cases was actually in removing biases from applicants, where they removed any gender markers, you know, those that people typically have biases towards. So yeah, removing, like I said, gender for sure. And then also, as you write job descriptions, saving people a lot of time. Like, you don't need to write a full job description for a role that you already have within the company, right? But then removing terms that can be, say, off-putting to women or of other minority groups. And so there has been a lot of work, and those were some of the, like I said, early low-hanging fruit in terms of applying AI for success factors. So yeah, that's one of the ways.
Thank you. So, Ranjit, do you want to add to the discussion?
I think if I could take it from a slightly different lens, I mean, I think if you ask the questions like internal, evangelism of AI and Google, you don't really need it that much. It's sort of a unique culture where we're very, very adoptive of it. But I would say that looking at the media and entertainment community as a whole, I think about the reskilling process as being one. We talked about this earlier, inherently tied to education and knowledge and training resources, right? And the thing is, there's a natural process to where that will flow through a pipeline all the way down to different educational channels over time, until the point where, like my elementary age kids are learning coding, right? So similarly, I think we're going to see that same sort of process with AI. The thing is, it's moving so fast. I think where the fear in terms of talent replacement and anxiety comes from is also going to be partly that folks don't necessarily have access to those resources yet, and we're not necessarily moving fast enough when it comes to making them available. So where my head goes, and I think a lot of the resources that Google has put in place, is about really short-circuiting that model, kind of using our platforms, partnering with the right organizations in order to make those resources available, whether it's partnering with universities, partnering with guilds and unions and industry trade organizations, partnering with AILA, et cetera. It's like those are the types of groups where we need to use those as mechanisms in order to provide that information, and as I said earlier, sort of like short-circuit the natural process that will take place with that information passing.
So what about it, Tala?
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of what Ranjit just said really resonated with me. Maybe for me to like kind of zoom in the technology and product space. We obviously have, job responsibilities, skill requirements, etc., but we also explicitly hire for competency. And by that I mean curiosity, continuous learning, passion for innovation, really diving into problems. And this has been really relevant for us as we switch up tech stacks and different tools. Obviously, AI has a lot more potential to be truly transformational, but really the different individuals that are curious and want to learn more. And then kind of like what Ranjit was saying, making sure we have the appropriate forums for sharing information, opportunities to upskill. We have specific AI Slack channels so people understand what the enterprise tool set is and what the use cases are, and just like the basic information so people have at their fingertips what's available. And then we have experts specifically in my team that can consult or give input on specific projects.
As a follow-up, before we move on from this conversation, what's one skill that you think employees need to know or master to get ahead of this AI current?
I think one of the biggest things, and we've talked a lot about this at Tala, is really understanding prompt engineering. I think we've had some early, perhaps naive applications of AI where it's just like, put some stuff in there and see what comes out, and it's garbage. And that kind of came up in the previous panel too. And so we put a lot of effort into basically creating templates by use case, and really a lot of dialogue around the power of prompt engineering and iterative prompt engineering too. And then I think the other piece I would say is what is the right tool for your use case?
I would say, critical thinking and not just assuming that it's an AI tool and it's valuable. Making sure that how is it valuable to you, right? And so, like I said, identifying what are the tools that you need to help you be more efficient, more productive, right? The goal is to remove these repetitive tasks, but those critical thinking skills are still needed, and curiosity, and continue to foster, those skills because they are becoming increasingly more important.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think critical thinking, if I could plus one, that's a big factor to it because, I'd say that my first priority I would recommend is just getting folks to use it, getting past that apprehension to do so. That's point number one, because once it becomes habitualized, you'll find people are going to be recognizing how it builds into their own skill set, how it builds into their own job functions. But beyond that, I think critical thinking is a big one in the sense that, if I could raise an example, like the last company that I was with has you all can look it up, it has a massive documentation culture and document writing culture. But when you can go into an AI and with a 2-sentence prompt, go ahead and generate a 6-page long document in all of 2 minutes, right? you have to really have an eye for, okay, but what of my original thought and creative process and my knowledge and experience was actually driving the output here, right? Is this in line with my voice? Is this relevant to what we should be doing as a business? Is this something that is worth sharing? And actually, lately, a lot of folks that I work with have said, okay, that's really great. You were able to generate, 10 pages on the history of this side of the business for us, but we just need 3 bullet points on it. So I think that tendency to overcreate to some extent is going to be naturally there, but applying a critical eye to that is what we're doing.
A lot of long dashes.
Yeah.
Eric, do you want to contribute?
I'll build on that. I think it's just knowing your audience at the end of the day as well. To your point, if I'm presenting something to the board, I'm probably going to have to tone it back a little bit. Or flip side is if I'm giving something to a room full of accountants, they're all very detail oriented, so they'll consume that 6-page document like beasts. And so, yeah, it's just know your audience. I think when you're utilizing AI and putting stuff out there.
The gift of discernment.
Yes, exactly.
So Stephanie in the fireside chat started to bring up ethics and governance. So I was curious, just from your perspective, how this lands at a board level. What are you being asked at this point in AI development and as it relates to talent?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So the boards that I'm on are the Rhode Island Physician Group, as well as BioAmerica, the biotech company. I think for both of those, at the board level, the discussions are, where are we with AI? How are we going to integrate AI into the future plans? And if the management team doesn't have any strategies, then it's really pushing to not miss the boat on it. The advisory board that I'm on, that was a heavy discussion that we had very, very early on was how does AI play into the behavioral health space? And so after some discussion, we realized like, okay, here's where we can fit it in. So it's really about boards it's all top of mind because any event that you go to, people are talking about it. And I think that if it's not in strategy, they're going to push you really hard to think about strategically how can we integrate it in here.
As CFO, have you been asked about any key metrics?
Yeah, I mean, from the AI perspective, so for Akido as a CFO, obviously we're utilizing AI in healthcare. So the mission I was given was, Eric, why isn't there a system that just closes the books by itself with AI? And so I did actually go out and start meeting with some of the up-and-coming companies from a finance and accounting perspective. And I'll tell you, it's all coming. It's just maybe a few years away from being usable by a Google, an SAP, the bigger companies. And I truly think that's because all the AI engineers are focused on building self-driving cars and rocket ships that go into space.
So we were talking about corporate digital strategy, and I think you had some insight as it relates to Tala.
Yeah, I think for us, and it's very similar to what Eric was just saying, I think boards as well as C-suites just want to know what your plan is for AI, how you're leveraging it, what's the impact, and I think in the conversation we had earlier this week, at least when I'm presenting what we're doing from like a product roadmap perspective, or how we're building personalization engines, or continuing to evolve our ML, the bottom line is really what's the impact, like what are we driving? We're a high growth company, what are the proof points? What does the customer journey look like? How are we changing year over year? And if AI is a part of that, amazing. But I think the flip of that, to your point, is if I had no answer for like what is AI, that would be also a bad day for me. So I think it's just finding the middle ground and the nuance and not falling trap to some of the hype.
Yeah, I would just add, like, it's not an option for boards not to dig in and be very engaged on this topic, because it's not something that they can outsource. And as you mentioned, what are those metrics, right? Like, the board is very interested. One of the things I've talked about is skill liquidity. Like, what are those, skills that are going to be needed as you build product, right? And so, yeah, I think it goes across the board. This is not something that's being done in a silo, at least not at SAP in terms of AI. Every board area is deeply engaged because we want to bring, like I said, all the employees along. And so this is not something I actually currently report to our Chief Technical Officer. And, even though he's responsible for the strategy, it's not something that's going to be done, like I said, in a silo. It's something that we have to bring our employees along with. But definitely the board is going to be keeping metrics and interested in these metrics and how we're performing. So I will say that it's not an option. Every board is absolutely engaged.
I'm trying to think what more to say. John said if I just plus one everything. But yeah, the things that come to mind, I think, to Karina's point is when you think about the metrics, what we're seeing a lot of, I'm not going to speak for Google in this case, but more so my customers, my partners, is certainly looking at which of these AI tools, which of these functions, where they're seeing uptick, where they're seeing adoption. I think the issues we're seeing is that a lot of businesses, because there's such a kind of massive gold rush moment here, is that you have a lot of folks just like throwing their credit cards down and procuring software and procuring tooling and using it on a moment-to-moment basis, regardless of what the company policies around that are or whether they even exist. Right. So that's the way I've seen it. It's a little hard to describe. Is kind of a company that was going through this ended up centralizing that AI evaluation function in, yes, a cross-functional committee, but the emphasis there is the cross-functional piece, because this particular business I'm talking about has a games business, has a movies business, has a TV business, has all of these different lines, right? And they can, so they needed some level of representation for those at that central point. It can't be solely engineering based or finance based or something like that. Type of proving ground that essentially becomes an extension of procurement. It can't be that. It needs to be something where they're prioritizing how we establish these paths and how we establish value for these individual businesses through AI usage. And the ideal is over the long term that committees like that don't need to really exist, right? This is a point in time kind of solution to the present problem. Mm-hmm. So I think of it that way, as like it's not just the centralization and the evaluation of that, but it's also ensuring that there's connectivity with individual business units and that you're mapping to personas to represent those as you evaluate those potential use cases and figure out what your standards would be. The other thing I would say to do, you were talking about this earlier a bit, but evaluating roadmap to an extent. I mean, we're seeing a lot of boards, a lot of C-suites that are trying to dive into what they're reading in the news or what the latest and greatest types of solutions are. And I think when you're looking at like a really massive scale, one of the things that's good to consider is that the features and the roadmaps and the entrance into this market are changing at such a rapid basis that you kind of want to couch a lot of your decision making not even on the functionality that's available today, but what functionality is available 6 months from now, 9 months from now, etc. Which businesses are primed to be able to provide that you can rely upon to do so, that have a track record from an AI portfolio sense, more so than a point solution kind of basis.
One thing to bring it back to you on entertainment that we spoke about before was my work at SAG-AFTRA. We were very much into deepfake legislation and incorporating that into the contracts. And as you hear about the virtual agents and just the use of media now, where you see the face, but it's not necessarily the message. And I think, Eric, you brought up a good point of how that's now hitting internally, where instead of getting the email or the text messages to forward the money to a CFO, that now it's actually coming with a face and a voice that's AI generated. Can we just have a little discussion before we open it up to the audience about what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, really quickly, and so this maybe goes to the kind of dark side of AI. About a year ago, it was in the news, there was a poor gentleman, I think, in Asia. He got a Teams call from the global CFO in Europe. I'd never talked to this global CFO before, but the deep fake basically popped up with video feed, voice. Sounded exactly like what that global CFO sounded at the last company meeting. They also brought in other executives from the company into the Teams meeting. This gentleman thought it was completely real, rushed to wire the money out, and it was lost. I read that article. I instantly went to my team and said, if I ever call you or text you or get you on Teams and ask you to wire something out ASAP, this is the secret password. So do you remember when your parents used to say, do not take a ride from anybody unless they have this secret password? That's what we have in my finance department, is no one can wire anything without asking me for the secret password if I'm not physically there. So just a warning for everybody out there, it's happening, and so you just gotta be extra careful and try to devise some of these things for yourself.
Did you have anything you wanted to add? If not, it's okay.
No, I think you put me on the spot.
Because you're so good.
I think a lot of in terms of establishing the kind of regulations and again guardrails, SAG-AFTRA and other guilds have done a lot of the diligence, and I think everybody in this industry should be incredibly grateful of that a lot of the diligence has been done, and there are going to be wins, losses, etc., like pros and cons of these types of agreements, and there will be changes to them, I'm sure, in a number of years. But inherently, I think what a lot of organizations are now doing is, okay, good, at least we now have a framework, let's see how we operate within that framework. So from a scale functionality, I think it's really good that we have some of those rules in place, but there should be an openness to, down the line, changing them over time. But from a more tactical, kind of day-to-day security function, I can say that our models, from Google's perspective, our models inherently have a lot of security that's built into them to minimize creation of that kind of illicit content or criminal style of content. That said, if you all ever get a video recording of me asking me for money, my account number is actually... I'll also accept Amazon.
Thank you. Are we at time for questions now?
We can probably do 1 or 2 questions.
Okay, perfect. Do you want to take my mic or?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, looking at you. Let's do the first question.
So how do you discern for critical thinking when you're looking at hiring people? And how difficult is that, given, how can I say this diplomatically, our education history in the recent past in building that kind of skill level, given those challenges?
I can just quickly say, for certain roles, and I think it's becoming even more important besides critical thinking skills, is also teamwork and working with people. And I know for not just SAP and many other companies, I would bring in people and have them work on problems, or you talking live to people and giving them a problem. And by the way, this has been happening for a long time. I remember graduating from school and getting, talking to some financial firms that, will put you on the spot to answer a question. And they're not necessarily looking for you to give them the right answer, but they want to see what your thought process is. And so, and by the way, I think AI is gonna be helping us do that at the same time. So it's not just humans.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, tactically, we do technical case studies, typically very ambiguous, and it's really to see how somebody walks through with the interview panel, how they go there. The other piece I do that's more on the soft skills side is just questions like, what's the most impactful feedback you've had in your career? How do you pursue continuous learning? What is the advice you would give somebody starting out in your field based on what you've learned in the last however many years? And just to get a sense of being reflective.
And from an HR perspective, I co-sign on both of these. I think we're seeing a shift to more competency-based interviewing and also use cases where it provides that simulation of the actual skill in action. And then what's neat about AI is instead of the people who usually do the evaluation, they're uploading it into a system that actually gives a scorecard ranking. And that does, if programmed correctly, reduce some of the biases that goes into the interview process as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Ahmed. So my question is also with the context, or I'll just quickly explain the context. The context is many people, especially in tech, were saying AI to be on the optimistic end, and everyone is focusing on just that optimistic world, which is like the safe world. And there's some other aspect of AI, which is looking at it on the job level and looking at it at the rate at which we are replacing jobs. If we get to a level of unemployment, there might be huge chaos in the economy. And what are the actual jobs that we can actually transition to, where we can train people to quickly move to before we get to that level of chaos? Can you highlight some of those jobs that you think many people, especially with the era of robotics coming in, humanoids taking even the physical labor jobs, where do you see humans transitioning to what talent in age of AI?
I would just mention, I do know of a study, there's at Stanford, the human-centered AI. There's a professor there that runs the digital economy lab, and he's done a study on this, like based on job categories, like how much you feel like AI will impact, certain jobs. There's many different opinions in terms of how close we are to that, but there are many studies to show, depending on the job, obviously, and some already started, right? A lot of ordering is being done, automated, right? So, but I'll let Raju.
What was your name again? Ahmed. Thank you. I love that question. I really love that question. I think I'm going to answer the question with a little bit of an anecdote, which is that years ago when I was interning in media and entertainment, I was an intern at Paramount Pictures at the Notes Productions, and running around and taking notes and writing script coverage and grabbing people coffee. Pretty much that entirety of that job has now been automated, except for grabbing the coffee, but soon. So I think the point being that when you look at what those internships look like today and what those entry-level positions look like today at even a studio, what you're seeing is a greater ask for or work that does involve more of that creative input than what it used to. Right? I was thankful at the time just to be able to run and get somebody coffee, but today, I mean, with that being an easier job to accomplish in an automated fashion, I think it gives the opportunity for those individuals to be really, to a degree, ask more of. I mean, maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, but ask more of in terms of direct involvement in projects and then the work they're doing. And that inherently makes them more essentially able to learn better on the job as well than doing those kinds of menial and redundant tasks. But it goes back to the point of there are definitely certain industries where the redundant tasks are the way in which you learn how to do something well. But to that point, I think that's where it goes back to we need to short circuit the kind of reskilling functions when it comes to using AI to redirect where we've associated value in just the repetitive work. Like the value isn't necessarily in the repetitive work, it's in the creative output that comes from it. right? So I think there are situations where we as a society have assessed value as being just based in that repetitive action. And when that can be automated out, okay, well, what greater things can this individual provide that's utilizing the full scope of their brain, right, of their mind and their opinions.
By the way, though, if you guys enter a Korean restaurant, they do have the bots that will bring you coffee.
Yeah. So that's fun too. That can be an intern.
At least that last Korean restaurant.
I would add one more thing to that question. Just pushing back on companies and their corporate digital strategy. I think it's really important as we're human first to really look at the implications of software and digitalization on staff, so we don't have a situation like grocery stores where they immediately terminated a lot of people when they put in the self-service only to hire them back. So really, what are we doing? What's the workforce planning? What's the strategy? And how do we elevate those jobs to be more purpose-driven? So people find passion in what they're doing, want to come into work, and there's a big redesign aspect to this if companies do it right.